The Last Story is one of those titles that took me far too long to play. Since its release on the Wii in 2012, I had always wanted to dive in, particularly because it was developed by Mistwalker, which of course means that Final Fantasy creator Hiranobu Sakaguchi is involved. One could even argue that at one point in time, The Last Story was the last story ever written by Sakaguchi, until it became the second last story after he wrote Fantasian in 2021. In an interview, Sakaguchi stated that The Last Story was primarily born from reflecting on the design mistakes he made during the development of Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey, and that his style of game was not in tune with current gaming trends. Sakaguchi's aim was to create something new. Something new is exactly what The Last Story feels like, as all these years later, I have still never experienced a combat system quite like it. Now, I will always associate this title with Operation Rainfall, which was a campaign designed to persuade Nintendo to release Xenoblade Chronicles, Pandora's Tower, and The Last Story in North America. All three of these JRPGs were eventually localized for North America, and while Nintendo have never outright stated that Operation Rainfall was the reason for this, it is probable that the immense support for this campaign did have some influence. Up until recently, I had only ever played Xenoblade Chronicles, as I've been waiting for a modern remaster for years, but since that isn't happening anytime soon, what better time than now? Does The Last Story hold up to Sakaguchi's other famous titles? Is it worth dusting off your Wii Wii to play? Let's look into it. Before we get into the review, if you liked this video, it would help me out a lot to hit that like button and sub for more JRPG content coming soon. You could also further support this channel by hitting that super thanks or becoming a member of the channel. I'd also love to know what your thoughts are on The Last Story. Have you played it yet? What was your experience with it? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, let's get into it. As its name suggests, The Last Story has a huge focus on its storytelling, and a key way that it delivers its grand tale is through its cinematic cutscenes. There is an impressive amount of cutscenes here, and just about everything is voiced, creating a very film-like experience. In terms of the quality of the voice acting, it's pretty good for the most part, but a little hit and miss at times. I think that the standard of voice acting in general has definitely improved over the years. Something interesting is that, like Xenoblade Chronicles and Pandora's Tower, this game was also handled by Nintendo of Europe, and as a result, all have a voice cast of British voice actors. Personally, I really enjoy these accents, which is something that you don't hear too often outside of these Operation Rainfall titles. And I guess now is a great time to bring up the soundtrack. It was composed by none other than Sakaguchi's right-hand man, the great Nobuo Uematsu. This time around, his focus was to create a mixture of video game and film music to emphasize emotion and ambient sounds while avoiding his signature jingles and fanfares. The result? It sounds amazing and really supports the mood and tone of this story-focused JRPG. The story follows a group of mercenaries, including the protagonist Zale, who dreams of becoming a knight. Early in the game, Zale receives a mystical Mark of the Outsider, which grants him unique powers in battle. Then, after crossing paths with a noblewoman named Callista, the two become involved in an ongoing war between humans and the beast-like Gurak. The majority of this narrative involves trying to end the war and also learning the truth behind the Mark of the Outsider. This story unfolds over 44 chapters, and while this may seem like a lot, they are very short and some only take around 15 minutes to complete, with my entire playthrough taking less than 30 hours. This pacing is incredibly fast. The next objective is always in sight, with little filler content thrown in between. The majority of the game is also set in the island fortress of Lazarus, which has one main city and next to nothing to explore outside of the city walls. You see, The Last Story is an incredibly linear game, and its lack of exploration and optional content means that the large majority of the time you'll be progressing through the story. Fortunately, the story is really good, and I was always engaged, wanting to know what would happen next. This is partly due to the great characters. Each of them are likeable and have some cool moments without being deep or particularly well developed. Some of them simply just have their own orange stick and nothing more. Seren, for example, is addicted to the bottle, while Lowell is addicted to the women. Despite the little development they have, they were a lot of fun, especially their conversations with one another. Yep, something I love in my RPGs is party member banter, and these characters all have a lot to say while running throughout the city or the dungeons. It's just so annoying when this banter is cut off when a cutscene activates. This happened more times than I could count. In regards to the extra content, there is a fairly simple arena and 17 side quests on offer, most of which are very simple and fetchy. The interesting thing about them is that you have to discover them yourself, old school style. There is no map markers or quest log, you just have to run around the large city of Lazarus and talk to the right people at the right time. I did a bunch of these, but it turns out I missed a lot of them. There's also a few very elaborate optional side quests that actually count as chapters, like this one with old mate Horace here. You need to help him rescue his wife, who happened to stumble into a haunted mansion, which is something that my wife does on the daily. These quests have their own unique locations and enemies and were definitely worth doing. It would have been great if there were a few more of these though. At first glance, the last story appears to have your typical action RPG combat system with melee attacks, blocking and dodging, but in reality it is far from it. Instead, this combat is more like an action tactical hybrid, as a lot of the time you don't want to be directly attacking your enemies. The most unique mechanic here is the ability for Zale to use his gathering ability. When activated, it will draw the focus of all enemies on the battlefield, slightly slow them down, double the casting speed of your mages, and revive nearby downed allies. Toggling this on and off at the right times is one of the key strategies in battle. Now, while you can only control Zale, you are able to manually issue abilities to your party members when your skill gauge is full. This becomes especially useful later in the game when each character unlocks their own unique, powerful spirit attack. Healing is a bit of an interesting one. For starters, each character has 5 lives in battle, and if Zale is KO'd, he will nearly instantly revive himself, provided it hasn't happened 5 times. The only real way to heal is through your mage's healing circles that can be placed around them on the ground. Entering this area will gradually restore your HP. Furthermore, Zale can use his Gale ability to defuse this circle for instant HP recovery to all party members. This combat has some great ideas, and I really love how different it is. Where it truly shines is in its boss fights, which are highly strategic, making great use of the unique battle mechanics. Most of the bosses have their own gimmick, and there is usually something that you'll need to work out before you can hit them where it hurts. Most of the time, your party members will be there to help by yelling out hints. At other times, you may need to analyze the enemy, but this implementation is stupid, just like Horace's wife. To analyze the enemy, you'll first need to enter first person view, hover the crosshair over the enemy, press another button, then read the text description that appears. The problem with this is that it's all in real time. I'm not sure who thought it would be a good idea to make you read a paragraph of text when you're in the middle of battle getting slaughtered by your enemies. It must have been Horace's wife. But on the other hand, the game is definitely on the easy side. Like every other aspect of the game, dungeons are also very linear, and once you kill a mob, they're gone for good. You can, however, find these tasty red circles on the ground to summon a bunch of enemies to slaughter. After grinding here for 5 or so minutes, you will become OP and probably slaughter the next boss that comes your way. Now, while the combat does have some very interesting and enjoyable mechanics, it is very rough around the edges. And by rough, I mean so sharp that they could slice your arm off for even mentioning them. Where do I start? Firstly is the fact that the roll button is the same as the take cover button, which caused me to take cover when I was meant to be dodging. And when you do take cover, you can't rotate the camera, making those sneaky strike attacks way more difficult than they should be. Then there's the 2 buttons that you need to lock onto the enemy, which felt very unnecessary. Oh, and activating first person view also makes Zale look in the direction he is facing, not where the camera is facing. Talk about clunky. Every one of these things could be so easily addressed in a quality remaster, and if they were, this combat would have been taken to the next level. The last story is very light when it comes to its RPG upgrade mechanics, just like Horace's wife when it comes to her brain cells. In fact, the only customizing that you can do is your character's weapons and armor. This equipment upgrade system works well enough, even if it is very simple. There are loads of different weapons that can be collected throughout the game, and each one can be upgraded a certain number of levels. These upgrades start with monetary requirements, but you'll soon need specific items to take them further, and many of these are only obtained late in the game. Most pieces of equipment also come with passive bonuses that gradually become stronger as they level up, and this means that you won't always be equipping the one with the highest stat boosts. Unfortunately, that's all there is to it. You will occasionally find stat increasing items after battle or hidden around the town, but aside from that and good old fashioned leveling up, there's nothing to be done. I really felt that something should have been done with the character's battle skills, as you simply just learn a few through leveling up and that's it. Something you can do, however, is change the colors of your character's armor, and you can even purchase and unlock different dyes to give you even more options. This was a nice addition, even if it doesn't alter your effectiveness in battle. It took me far too long to dive into the last story, but I'm glad I finally took the time out to play it. Mistwalker's 7th title was an absolute blast, but I wouldn't expect anything less from the pair of legends that are Sakaguchi and Uematsu. The last story's biggest strength is its story. There are loads of voice cutscenes, the pacing is fast, and I was invested throughout the whole game. The story is also very well supported by Nobuo's masterwork, which fits the style of the game perfectly. It's just a shame that it's so linear. There is a complete lack of exploration outside of the main city, and not much else to do outside of some very simple and quite hidden side quests. When developing this game, Sakaguchi aimed to do something new, and this was certainly achieved with the action-based combat, which places a huge emphasis on its tactical elements. While this system is really fun, the controls were not. They felt so clunky and took a long while to get used to. There was also a lack of RPG upgrade mechanics, with a simple equipment upgrade system being your only real option. It has been over 12 years since the last story was released, but unfortunately it's still stuck on the Wii with no sign of a modern re-release. And this is a crying shame, since I think a lot of people would love this game but just don't have the opportunity to play it. What are your thoughts on the last story? Have you played it? What did you think? Or is it something you want to play in the future? Let me know in the comments below. This was Hellfire RPGs. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, it would help me out a lot to hit that like button and sub for more JRPG content coming soon. You could also further support this channel by hitting that super thanks or becoming a member of the channel. See you next time.